Hey guys, Chain Link Fence here. I am doing a sort of video essay thing, like it's not a video essay. Didn't put that much effort into it. This is upon Jacob's request. So I do have bullet points for this video, so if I'm looking over, it's my bullet points. But it's a Hunger Games video essay. I'm generally just going over some of my thoughts about like what happened in the books and what I thought of it. It's not like a review. I'm not gonna like be giving the plot. If you never read the books or watched the movies, I don't know, sucks to be you, I guess. But first things with that is, my first thought about it would kind of be about the way I think Hunger Games is like generally viewed. Because I have found a lot of time, if you like talk about Hunger Games with somebody, there's this general conclusion of like, oh, that's just like a silly book for girls type of a thing, or like, oh, that's just like one of those like Twilight love triangle books. And I feel like, one, it's such a disservice to write off a book just because it's made for girls, especially with like something that's made for like young girls. A lot of the time, interests that like teen girls like is very looked down upon. And I think Hunger Games definitely falls under that umbrella. I think also sort of about like the reputation of Hunger Games is the fact that it's so often grouped in with all of its copycats. Because Hunger Games, I think, was really like, it was the start of that dystopian main female character boom that happened in like the 2010s, I guess. Before my time, I was like 8, but I think it was the kind of originator of that, and all of the other copies are so much worse. And I think that because it was the originator, it ends up getting like lumped into all these other books that are kind of just, you know, copies of the Hunger Games, and that they aren't actually good on their own, and that they were just trying to ride the wave of like dystopian novel, you know. And I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that Hunger Games gets lumped into that, because Hunger Games has like, I think it has so much to say. I think that it actually touches on important things, and I think the way it's written or the way it's formatted can be a little bit simplistic in a way, or simplistic in the sense of it's very easily readable and it's very easy to like catch your attention. But I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that it means that it's a, you know, very commercially successful thing. Like, if you have something that is sort of more on the difficult side to consume, it's probably not going to be as commercially successful. And I don't think that it being commercially successful makes it bad in any kind of way. With it being easily readable, a lot of people say that like, oh, Hunger Games, and does it have good world building, or there are plot holes, or like silly things happen. And to some degree, I do agree. I don't think that it's like a perfectly world-built story, or that there aren't any plot holes. But also, although it doesn't have like 50 pages of world building before you even get to the story, what I like about it is that the story and the world building comes so naturally along with when you're reading it, and that when you need to know you're sort of finding out as you need to know it, and I feel like it feels very much so natural, and you don't have all this awkward like disposition. I feel like a lot of world building, in my opinion, where it's like you're reading and reading and reading all these pages, and it's like, okay, when's the story happening? I have to hear about, you know, ages ago, all this stuff that happened. And I think that's also like, it's the way that you're finding it out as you go, I think is interesting, because the book is from the perspective of Katniss, who like is just a poor girl from District 12 that doesn't know anything. Like, there's no reason, if the book is from her perspective and her perspective only, there's no reason for us to know the like finite details of how everything in this society works, because she wouldn't know that, and like that's how it makes sense for the book. So when people kind of look down or like insult Hunger Games for the world building, like to some degree I can understand where like there are some plot holes, but I also think that like the simplicity of the world building makes sense since it's from Katniss's perspective and not just like random disposition that we just get to know for no reason, so that the book makes sense. You know, we don't know stuff, and it makes sense that we don't know it as a reader because we're reading from her perspective. The other thing I like about it is that it touches on a lot of subjects that like actually mean something in the real world, or like actually have some kind of relevance, you know, like things aren't just happening to happen. And I think in a lot of what's happening in the book, she is actually making a criticism about, you know, the real world. And I always think it's funny when whenever people are like, wow, like celebrities at the Grammys, like this is so Hunger Games, are wearing these weird outfits. It's like, what do you think it's based on? I mean, it's not just based on like our modern day celebrities. Like you see that with any people who become rich. They try to differentiate themselves from the average person by experimenting with like clothing or like anything to make themselves seem like they're not a regular person. So like when people say like, oh, like this is so like the Hunger Games, I'm like, actually that's just like what the Hunger Games is about. I feel that way about all dystopians, actually. Like this isn't a Hunger Games thing. I feel just like a lot of the time when it comes to dystopians, like if we're talking about like 1984 or Brave New World or Animal Farm, we don't see similarities with dystopian novels because our world is becoming dystopian. It's because it's always sort of been dystopian. The reason they wrote those books is because they were seeing what is happening in their world right then and there, and they're making like commentary on it pretty much. They're saying like, this is how it could get worse, this is how it evolves, but it's already here. I mean, the things that he was talking about in 1984 was the things that he was viewing in his life just then. And when we're viewing it now, it's not because we're suddenly becoming a dystopian society. It's because that's what it's been about. That's the whole point of the book, was to show how it's happening to us right now. I always have beef with that when people say stuff like that about dystopian books. Yeah, I like that The Hunger Games has commentary on real life things, and that there is a lot of deeper meaning to a lot of things that could be taken on a surface level. And I think a lot of people do take it on the surface level, you know? And I think that's where a lot of the criticism for the book comes from, because people look at it, they take it in a very surface level way, and then they say, well, this is just silly, and this is just a romance, and this is just, you know, people killing each other, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you actually read the books, if you actually watched it, you would get that it's more than that, you know? Going on to characters, because I wanted to talk about characters a little bit. Weirdly enough, I am going to start with Gale. I feel like Gale is such a weird place to start from. His character is very interesting to me because I think it represents multiple things. One, it represents Katniss's decisions. I think a lot of the time, people talk about like, oh, the love triangle, blah, 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 blah. In my opinion, I don't believe Hunger Games is like a true love triangle. I don't really know how to describe that. Maybe that's just like what I want it to be. You know what I mean? Like, but I think that Gale's character for Katniss is really supposed to be representing her decisions and is supposed to be representing the way she wants her life to go. Because a lot of the time there's this disposition with her between like choosing Gale and choosing Peeta, but more so who she wants to be. Does she want to be the revolutionary with Gale who is trying to like change the world, or with Peeta like to run away with him and to pretty much like almost like escapism, where it's not like she's solving her problems, but it's like she's in a way freeing herself from it, with like disconnecting from it almost. You know, and in some obvious ways they make reference to this. In the third book, you have the scene in the, what's her name? Tigress? Is that her name? I don't know. But it's that scene right before they're trying to get into the Capitol and they're going to go kill Snow, where Katniss is asleep or not asleep. She's pretending to be asleep, or she had just woken up or something, and she overhears Gale and Peeta talking, where Gale, I'm pretty sure it's Gale, says something along the lines of like, you know, which, like, Katniss is gonna pick whoever she thinks she can survive the best with. Like, is it gonna be a hunter or like a baker type of thing? And I think that very, like, just clearly shows what the author is trying to say about the characters and how their relation is more than just like, oh, do you want the tall, dark, and handsome one or the blonde one? When talking about Gale as well, there's also the aspect of his character in the sense of like war and like what it means for the revolution. Because on one side, like, you need revolutionaries who do want to fight for, you know, their own freedom and their own rights. But at the same time, inevitably at the end of the book, he becomes a warmonger. Well, maybe warmonger is a little bit much. I don't know if he became a warmonger per se, but there became a certain point where to him, it didn't matter what had to be sacrificed for the end goal. He didn't care how many people he had to kill and how many innocent lives had to be ruined so that he could, you know, get back at Snow and free, you know, all the districts. But inevitably, like, that's a horrible thing. So I think on one side, it represents that, like, you need revolutionaries, you need people who want to fight for, you know, their own rights and their own beliefs and like their own freedom. But at the same time, maybe don't become a warmonger, maybe don't bomb children, you know? So, but I think his character is interesting, and I think a lot of the time it's very easily written off on the romance side. But I think it's more than that. And yeah, with Katniss's character, I feel like there is a lot to say about Katniss's character. And I feel like I could do this video so much better a couple years ago, because now I'm not as deep in it as I used to be. When I was like, how old would I have been? Like 17? I loved these books when I was 17. I was absolutely obsessed with them. And I think I would have had a lot more to say. I still like them, but it's just not so in my head about it. But with Katniss's character, I think one thing that is very interesting, and I think sort of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the world building and like how you're learning about things happening in the world, is that I like that even though she's like a badass character, she isn't a badass character in the way of that she knows what she's doing or that everything's very intentional. I think that there is something very genuine and real about the fact that, like, yeah, she's a 16-year-old girl and she's like afraid and she doesn't know what she's doing and like she's literally fighting to survive, and that's that. Like, I think a lot of throughout the book, she doesn't know what she's experiencing, or she doesn't know how she feels about certain things. She feels very conflicted, and I like that that shows that she doesn't really know herself. She doesn't know what she wants. She doesn't know how to perform the role that she's been put in by her society. And I like that because she's supposed to be young. So, and she's actually acting young. I think a lot of the time when you have like younger characters in any kind of media, they like to represent them as being very, almost like all-knowing. Like, I don't know, like, even if there's a form of hesitancy, I feel like you don't as much see this form of like emotional distress of like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know? And I like that that is with Katniss, you know, where you can tell that she is pretty much just being manipulated by her superiors, in a sense. I don't know what you would call that, but like the people above her, the people who are supposed to be taking care of her, like they have ulterior motives, and because she's young, she's easily susceptible to all of them, like pretty much trying to use her for their ulterior motives for whatever they want. And she's very much so left in the dark, even a lot of the time by Haymitch. She puts a lot of faith in him of saying that, you know, he wants the best for her and all that, and which is inevitably true in the book, but she's still left in the dark about it. She trusts him to a certain degree, but she doesn't actually really understand what's going on, you know, which leads to what happens in the third book. And I like that a lot, that they actually represent her as being like very young and very naive. And I like that the thing that makes her a hero is both like her practical skills, like she's a very talented person, but also just her actual like caring for people. Like there's so often a spotlight put on the fact that the thing that makes her different from everybody else is not just that she's strong, because all of the victors are strong, but the fact that like because she cares for others, she will do things against the Capitol for their sake. I think another part of it is I really like how Snow and Coin are done, because I like how she represented the fact that like the Capitol is evil, yes, but like the revolution, like District 13's revolution, isn't really being better. I think that the whole plot with Snow and Coin and sort of their like polarity but similarities thing that they have going on is very interesting, because I think it kind of represents how, like, if you have some evil in the world and you have like a revolution against it, how easily that revolution just becomes the evil it sought out to destroy. It's such a cliche almost, you know what I mean? Like that whole plot point is done all the time. Like, oh, I became the thing I wanted to destroy, blah blah blah. I feel like the thing that makes it done better in Hunger Games is I think that it's a little bit more subtle. You don't actually have them saying that. And I think what makes it interesting too is that it's not like you never have the character who has become the evil that they want to destroy recognize it. You don't really see that in the book, which I think is real, because I feel like you wouldn't recognize it. When you become a horrible person, you're always going to justify it. You're always going to say, well, I'm just trying to free my people, and I'm just trying to like, you know, I'm just trying to like you know, the Capitol's done all this stuff, and like, you know, if we don't retaliate, like, they'll just continue having the boot on us. And, you know, when you're doing bad things, there's always going to be an excuse for you to continue to do them. And I like that it made it less cliche that the people who kind of become like the Capitol don't really recognize it. I mean, the closest thing you get to anybody recognizing that is like Gale after he kills Katniss's sister, and he's like, oh, well, you know, but he never really, like, he doesn't super acknowledge it. It's kind of like insinuated that he feels bad, you know? But I really like that. I like that it shows the complexity of that situation and the reality of that, because it's real. Like, us against them, where like it was supposed to be just about like getting their own freedom, but it divulged into just us against them, and like it's either kill or be killed kind of a thing, where it's not really, like, I'm not saying that the things that happened wouldn't have had to happen for the Capitol to lose power, but what I am saying is that the place that they're coming from with it isn't really anymore just about their own freedom. It's about wanting to destroy Snow, which is also fair enough, you know. And that's something that I would also, I think I'd like to say about like Hunger Games, is I like how imperfect of a hero Katniss is. I think I kind of talked about this. I feel this way a lot about Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's one of my criticisms of it, is that he was such a perfect hero, and I think it did the book a disservice. But I think it's such a great thing about Hunger Games is that they don't make Katniss a perfect hero, and that they don't have her always make the right choice. I mean, she does some like objectively asshole things. That's what makes it real, and that's what makes it good. You know, I feel like that's my whole review of this. It's just like, oh, it's real, it's good. But that's how I feel about it. Another criticism I hear a lot about Katniss, more specifically, is this idea that she's sort of like I'm not like other girls kind of a character. The reason why I've heard the argument that Katniss is sort of an I'm not like other girls kind of character is based on the idea that she sort of looks down on the more feminine female characters in the book, like her mom. And it's one of those things where I just feel like, how did we read the same book? Like, I didn't really get that read at all. I feel like in a way, like, I think there is a lot of characters where she shows, like, feminine characters like Madge or her sister, where she is showing like admiration for them, or in a sort of way, like sort of appreciation of them, or just enjoyment of them. I mean, her and Madge were friends, they like hung out. Like, it doesn't really give off the vibe to me of like, oh, she hates femininity. The thing too with that is that I think some of maybe the more I'm not like other girls, like things that happen are really not about womanhood, but it's more so supposed to represent other things. Like, I think that there are a lot of references into the books about her talking about like, oh, fashion this, fashion that, like, that sucks, fashion bad. But I think that that's really about the disposition between like, oh, back home I'm some kid starving to death, hunting for my family because they're dying, and here I have to care about what color my dress is. I think that is what it's trying to say, and it's not trying to say like, all these other women care about clothes, but I'm one of the boys. That is not the read I ever got from it, personally. Few other things sort of that I wanted to mention about just certain things that happen in the books, or just some more specific details that I wanted to talk about, is one, the whole pearl and locket thing I always really liked. The whole thing with that, pretty much, to give a short explanation of it, is in the second book, they have to go back into the games, and Katniss has decided to sacrifice herself so that Peeta can live. Peeta wants to do the same thing, and he's trying to convince her not to sacrifice herself. So in preparation, he got this locket that has a picture of her family, and Gale. And he gives it to her and is like, I don't have anything to go home to. My family doesn't need me. Your family needs you. So you should hurry on back and like be with your family and let me sacrifice myself for you. And this is very much so obviously supposed to represent you pick your family and, in a way, Gale as a romance over me and let me die. Then later, she doesn't die or anything. Later, when they're in the games, he finds a pearl and an oyster and gives it to her. And it's just supposed to be a cute thing of like, oh, here you go, Pookie. So after she gets her head injury and they're in the District 13, and all she has from her whole life pretty much is her Hunger Games clip Mockingjay bird pin thing, her locket, and the pearl. And even though in the scenes in District 13, in a sense, is she like picking Gale with her, like literally like making out with him and shit. Dookie, by the way, I hated that scene. Worst scene of it. She still carries around the pearl, which I think is obvious symbolism for her picking Peeta over Gale. Because if she had picked her family and Gale, she would have the locket. But in all these scenes, she's taking with her this little pearl that is obviously supposed to represent her romance with Peeta. And I think that that's cute. And I like it. So I wanted to talk about it. There you go. With the whole love triangle thing, even though I was just talking about the romance aspect 1 second ago, I'm gonna die on my hill of that it's not a love triangle. There is no love triangle. I don't think it's actually a genuine love triangle. I don't think it's like that. The real trio in Hunger Games is Katniss, Haymitch, and Peeta. Like, the truth is that for a lot of the first book, Gale pretty much isn't in it at all. In the second book, he's in it for like half of it. And in the third book, he's just fucking annoying. Like, I'm sorry, he's in it actually a lot, and I hated it. But I don't think it's a true love triangle, and I think whenever people like show Gale, Katniss, and Peeta as like the main trio of the book, I'm like, okay, Haymitch is just gonna like catch strays then. Like, he was her mentor, and he provided a lot more in the book than Gale did, my opinion. The other thing I think that is very interesting that happens in the books is the way that they represent like disabilities. One, unlike the movies, they actually have a lot of the characters being disabled, because after you fight to the death, you're not in perfect condition. I mean, Peeta loses his leg. And then, like, with the Avoxes, it's these people who got their tongues cut out and are now, like, indentured slaves. And, I guess just slaves. You have indentured servants and then you have slaves. I guess they're slaves. To me, the representation of being disabled feels very natural because, one, a lot of the people who are disabled, they're the victors from the games who had horrible things happen to them. And, like, they lost a leg fighting to the death, and that's just what happens. And then, on the other side, you have the Avoxes who are slaves. Like, that's been done to them. Like, but what I really like about what is shown in Hunger Games about, like, disabilities is that, like, none of them are, like, super affected by it. Like, it's not like this thing where it's like, well, he lost his leg, so now, like, he's useless. Like, it almost, like, doesn't affect Peeta's character at all in the books. Because they just give him a robot leg, which is sick, okay? But I think that that's real, like, in this, like, sort of futuristic society where we have, like, all this other technology going on. It's not going to be the end of your life if you lose your leg. You get a robot leg. I guess if you're rich enough, you know? I guess if you're poor, you don't get a robot leg. Same thing with the Avoxes. It's like they still have forms of communicating even though they had their tongues cut out. I think it's good stuff. I think it's good content. I do. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the whole idea of, like, infighting and the manipulation that happens because you have, like, Katniss having this realization where she's like, oh, like, the Capitol is just pitting me against, like, all my neighbors and everybody I know so that they can continue to, so that I'm too distracted being upset at this other person so that they can continue to get away with doing whatever they want to me, pretty much. That sounds weird. That's horribly described. But, you know, like, it starts with her realizing that, like, her and Peeta, even though they come from, like, opposite sides of the district, are all just both people. And then her realizing that the other people she has to fight in the games, they're also just kids trying to survive, and that, like, it's kind of really sad, actually. And then even, like, with the other victors, realizing, like, oh, I have to fight these people, and they're just, like, old, and they're friends, and, like, their lives are gonna be over, and they have children, and, like, they want me to hate them, but it's just kind of sad. And then even later with, like, District 13 and the other people in the Capitol, like, you have her going through these series of multiple realizations of, like, I am supposed to feel hatred for these people, but the only really person I should feel hate for is Snow, which Snow is just a representation of the society. So it's like the pretty much government is what's keeping me down, and that all this stuff that's being fed to me about, like, hating all these other people is just the distraction from, you know, what actually matters in it. And I really like that. I think it's actually interesting. Like, it goes back to what I said about, like, the world building and, like, her actually saying something with the books. That is my Hunger Games review. Not review. Random gibberings and jabberings. A rant, maybe, per se.